Hi there, my name is Heather.
Hi guys, I'm Alex.
Welcome to Plant Fact Friday. This week we're talking all about pollinators. So here at the garden this summer, you'll find scavenger hunts and displays all about pollination. But we wanted to get you all refreshed and caught up on what pollination is, how it happens, and why it matters.
And who they are.
And who these guys are. So first off, what is pollination?
So pollination is simply the transfer of pollen from flower to flower. That's it.
Okay, but can it be any flowers?
No, it has to be two flowers of the same species or flowers that are closely related that they could hybridize.
Gotcha.
Good
so
question.
Like a hibiscus to hibiscus?
Yep, or
daisy.
aster to aster.
Perfect. So
Yes.
where does the pollen come from and where does it go?
Let's go take a look. So
Okay.
over here we have a beautiful hibiscus flower, and the pollen can be found right here on the anthers of the flower. The anthers are the male part of the flower that produces pollen. Pollen is that golden fuzzy stuff on my little ladybug finger there. Pollen comes from the anthers and moves to the sticky stigma. So the stigma is sticky because it has that sticky nectar on it. That's right, what the pollinators are there to enjoy. So from the anther to the sticky stigma, that is pollination.
Awesome. So if it makes it to the stigma, then what? What happens next?
So I'm going to use this flower model here to answer that question. So here we have the anthers, once again, that produces the pollen, moves to the sticky stigma right here in the center. Afterwards, it will travel down into the ovary of the flower to fertilize an ovule. And ovules are immature baby seeds. So after pollination occurs, those seeds can be made into, or those ovules can be made into fertile seeds. So that's why pollination is so important for flowers to make seeds.
Okay, so ovules become seeds
Yes.
and ovaries become
Fruits.
Awesome. So we obviously know a couple pollinators. Like Alex said, the pollen needs to move from one place to another, and this doesn't just happen on accident. In most cases, it takes a pollinator to help. So the first thing I think of when I think of pollinators is bees, and that's because they are excellent at pollinating. But obviously we also have butterflies, we have birds like the hummingbird, and beetles like ladybugs. So when these critters visit a flower to, let's say, a hibiscus and a bee, they visit to collect pollen maybe to feed their youngins, or maybe they drink some nectar, and then they go to another flower and do the same thing. They might, inadvertently leave some pollen behind, and that's pollination. So we obviously think of bees and butterflies first, but there's plenty of other things that are pollinating as well. We've got bats. Bats, if you didn't know, are just little fuzzy, cute little creatures that fly around. They're fuzzy like bees, and so they obviously collect a lot of pollen.
Yeah, at night, like bananas or agave, lots of night blooming flowers out there for bats.
What else do we have? We have flies, both flesh flies, so those are the ones that like stinky smells, but also there are plenty of species of flies that act a lot more like bees. They're called flower flies. Ants can be pollinators too, and I don't think we have an example here. Beetles,
dragonflies.
Sometimes dragonflies.
Yeah.
We've also got moths are great pollinators, and even things that aren't alive like the wind or water, those can move pollen around too. So these different pollinators obviously are all very diverse. They like different things, and it makes sense that flowers are diverse too, right, Alex?
Yes, and this phenomenon is called pollination syndromes.
Yeah.
So flowers can give us clues to who the pollinator might be. Tell us more.
Yes, so a pollination syndrome is essentially just a collection of floral traits that is all designed and catered to attract a certain pollinator. So like I mentioned, different pollinators like different colors, they like different shapes, sizes, scents, amount of pollen. Some are active at night, some during the day. And so different flowers over geologic time have evolved to cater to a specific pollinator. And they have these suites of traits that we call their pollination syndrome. Now, this is not to say that one pollinator can't have, or one flower can't have many pollinators, or one pollinator can't visit many flowers, but it is fun to kind of put on your detective hat, look at a flower, look at those traits, and think, who might visit this flower?
Yes.
So, for example, the hibiscus that we've been talking about, it's a large, beautiful flower, often very brightly colored, can be red, yellow, orange, any other color. It's got quite a bit of pollen, and it's a large flower. So I would guess this might attract a butterfly or a bird, and bees are usually a good guess too, because bees pollinate so many different things.
So many, yes.
I have another example over here in our arrangement. We have some different asters. So again, big flat flower. One pollinator that loves a flat flower is a butterfly.
Yes, they love to sit down when they eat. I also like to sit down when I eat.
Yes, so you'll find we have a lot in common with pollinators,
yes.
really. So I would guess that a butterfly might visit this flower, or a bee. And one fun thing to do out in the garden is to do this investigation, see who you think visits it, and then if you're patient enough, sit down and take a look and see if you guessed correctly. See if you can observe your pollinator in action.
Yes, definitely. So why is pollination so important? You learn about it in school. We talk about it here at the garden a lot.
A lot.
Pollination is so important, obviously, to make seeds, but tell us more.
Yes, so pollination is crucial to talk about because, like we've mentioned, it literally supports the plant life cycle. 75 to 95% of flowering plants rely on a pollinator to help continue their life cycle. So these critters and other vectors are literally sustaining plant life. No biggie, right?
Yeah, that is a lot of weight on tiny little insect shoulders. But also supporting human life, also a huge weight on their shoulders. So we talk about insects pollinating a lot of crops. So there's over 1,200 crop species that are pollinated, and that is about out of every 3 bites of food that you eat, you can thank a pollinator for. That's a lot of food.
Right, and beyond that, you can imagine how sustaining plant life also has a lot of ripple effects into the rest of the ecosystem. So things like stabilizing soil, cleaning the air, and supporting wildlife in so many different ways, all can be traced back to pollinators. So that is why you will always hear us talking about pollination at the garden.
Yes, another reason to talk about it is because pollinators are in decline due to habitat loss, pollution, and climate change. So it's really important to continue to have this conversation, but there are things that we can do that you guys can do in your very own garden. Tell us more.
Yes, so when you're thinking about how to support pollinators, the first thing you might think of is, I want to plant food that they can eat. So I want to plant flowers that have lots of nectar or lots of pollen, and that is great. But it's only a place to start. There's a lot more that we can do to support insects and pollinators.
Yes, you also need to think about including host plants. Host plants are so important for the life cycle of these insects. A great example of this is monarch and milkweed. We know that milkweed is a huge resource for monarchs, but that is there for the larvae, for the baby insects and the caterpillars to eat. So the monarch butterfly isn't necessarily pollinating the milkweed, but it's important to have those host plants to continue the life cycle.
And something that I recently learned is that many woody plants are also host plants. So things like tulip tree supports swallowtail butterflies. So do some research and you might find that a lot of plants are actually capable of supporting pollinators, not just those ones with lots of nectar and pollen. Now, another thing that all life needs is water. And with pollinators specifically, we want to make sure that we're providing water that they can drink safely without risk of drowning.
Yes.
So an easy way to do this is just a shallow dish filled with some pebbles or some marbles. And every time you water your garden, this dish will get a thin layer of water so that things like bees and butterflies can drink safely.
Another thing that you can do at your garden, which we try and do here at the garden, is to protect those overwintering insects. We have a lot of ground nesting and stem nesting bees that are also native to Iowa. So we delay that garden cutback until the spring to allow those insects to overwinter in those stems or in the ground. So leave the leaves on the ground to protect them.
We thank you for tuning in, and we hope that you visit us here at the garden this summer to learn more about pollinators. In the Gardener Show House where we are right now, we have a bunch of painted pollinators that you guys can find. That's just one of many pollinator activities we have.
Yes.
So thanks for tuning in, and we hope to see you at the garden soon.
Bye.